Kia ora. Hey, it's Mona here from the Humans Connecting team. Our podcast is all about soothing, supporting, challenging, and inspiring you to become a connected human. The content of our podcast is of a general nature, and consuming this content is not the same as seeking individual advice from a connection mentor, registered mental health professional, or coach. Conversations about human connection address loneliness. We destigmatize loneliness here at Humans Connecting. We do that by talking about loneliness openly. Loneliness conversations necessarily include a range of topics which at times may be difficult for us to talk about, to hear, and to sit with. If throughout our conversation this is true for you, we encourage you to please contact a mental health hotline. The link in the episode description can help you find some immediate support for many places you may be in the world. Our advice to you is this: meet yourself where you are and how you are right now. If you don't feel up to it, we'll be right here ready to be by your side when you're ready. We're glad you're here. Let's jump in.
Hello, it's Val. Welcome to the Humans Connecting podcast. Thank you for choosing to spend some of your day with us here on this episode of the Humans Connecting podcast. It's time in this episode, as it is always, but particularly in this episode, to talk about Bruno and to talk about Disney's movie Encanto and what that movie can tell us about the important concept of belonging. And we're going to have that conversation in this episode with Peg Fong and Guillermo Serrano in a few minutes' time. And at this point, it would be wonderful to say something or to play something of the song We Don't Talk About Bruno and to listen to some of the other wonderful tracks and clips from that movie. But we don't have anywhere near the amount of money that we'd need to pay Disney for the rights to use them. So instead, what we can encourage you to do is to jump on to YouTube or to your favorite streaming service or, an old-fashioned CD if you've still got that, or maybe vinyl, and play the music from the soundtrack, watch the movie, stream the movie if you're not familiar with it. But Peg, Guillermo, and I are going to use Encanto to talk about the concepts of belonging and connection in this episode. It's a fun and thoughtful conversation because Peg and Guillermo are hosts of a podcast called Alone Together, a curious exploration of loneliness, and its Spanish language equivalent, Juntos and Soledad. And they did an episode that focused almost entirely on Encanto and family dynamics in their podcasts. And Guillermo is Colombian, and he'll give us all sorts of insights into the movie and what Disney did well in portraying a Colombian family in that movie. But before we get into too much of that detail and I get kind of lost in talking about belonging and all that kind of stuff, I want to say hi. And I'm Phil McAuliffe, and I'm the founder of Humans Connecting, and I'm a global loneliness thought leader. I'm a speaker on loneliness and human connection. I'm a media commentator, an author, a connection mentor, and I'm a human who is endlessly curious about humans and the human condition. And I use my skills, my wisdom, and insights learned from my experiences of loneliness throughout my life and working with other loneliness leaders to start and then lead conversations about loneliness, connection, belonging to help humans, including humans like you, to feel more connected and less lonely. And when I'm not being a global loneliness thought leader, when I'm not being an author, a connection mentor, a speaker, a media commentator on loneliness, I'm also the host of this podcast. And we here at Humans Connecting, the team and I, we want this podcast to be your place where you can come and be supported, you can be challenged, and you can be inspired when you want to start getting the connection that you need and that you are absolutely worthy of in your life. Because you and I both know that loneliness feels horrible. And while we're learning more and more about how loneliness is terrible for us, we already know that connection is the antidote to loneliness. But if you're trying to move beyond your loneliness, you'll know that connection can feel, well, really hard to do, right? So we're here to help you with that. And it all starts through this podcast and at humansconnecting.org, where you'll find our products and our services for you, your workplaces, and, you know, for the world, really, for you to start all feeling more connected. And the Humans Connecting podcast is a new podcast, and we're a startup social enterprise, and we've got bold ambitions to help the world feel more connected because the humans in the world are feeling more connected to themselves, to those most important to them, and to their communities. And if this episode or any of our content makes you think, supports you, gives you good vibes, good feelings, please know that sharing this episode with just one other person or leaving a 5-star review on the podcast service or engaging with us on YouTube are all great ways, and they're free for you to say thank you for what we've provided and to support someone else who you know might benefit from this episode or any of our other content. However you choose to support us, we just want to say thank you so much in advance for just supporting us. And before I introduce Peg and Guillermo, I want to talk to you about the concept of belonging. Simply, we humans need to feel that we belong. And we're capable of doing all sorts of things to feel that we belong. And sometimes those things serve us. And then sometimes those things that we do to feel that we belong, well, they really don't serve us. And the concept of belonging is huge. And when it comes to, especially like when it comes to conversations about loneliness and connection. And here's why. When you, the real, beautiful, flawed, authentic you, feel seen and you feel heard, so that's the real, beautiful, flawed, authentic you feel heard, you will feel that you belong. So when you feel seen and when you feel heard, you will feel that you belong. And belonging, well, that feels like connection. When we belong, we feel connected. And we belong to something outside of us. We belong in our families, with our friends, our workplaces, and in our communities. So let's think of it this way. If you and I don't feel that we belong with the people around us, it's hard to kind of rustle up any kind of positive feelings of connection, isn't it? So belonging and connection kind of are like, they're really close. They're really close. So this is why belonging as a concept is important, because when we feel that we belong, we feel that we are connected. And when we feel that we're connected, we don't experience loneliness because we know already, as I said, that connection is the antidote to loneliness. So we know this kind of equation, and we can use this to hack. Well, we can use this as a hack, really, whenever we are experiencing loneliness. And that hack is to cultivate thoughts and feelings of belonging. And we feel that we belong, again, by reversing that equation when we feel seen and when we feel heard. So that's really simple, right? As an equation, that is very simple. Seeing, seen, being heard feels that we belong. And to belong, we need to feel seen and to feel heard. But as is always the case with some important things in life, it's simple to say, but it can feel really tough to do. But that's why we are here for you at Humans Connecting. And Disney's movie Encanto is a great example of how belonging and what we do and how we hustle to feel that we belong to something bigger than ourselves can stop us from truly feeling seen and feeling heard. And to talk about this movie, Encanto, and belonging, and to talk about Bruno, we're going to be joined really soon by Peg and Guillermo, who are both based in Vancouver. So Peg Fong is the creator and writer of the podcast Alone Together, a curious exploration of loneliness, which ran for 2 seasons. She has also written a young adult book based on the podcast, which was published just last month in March 2024. And there's going to be a link to that book in the show notes. And for his part, Guillermo Serrano is the host and producer of Juntos and Soledad, which is Alone Together in Spanish. And it launches its second season in May 2024. And in that podcast's first season, the show was heard in 25 countries and reached the top 10 in Mexico on Apple Podcasts. Professor Serrano is an educator and researcher specializing in global talent who has given talks around the world on belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So, with all of that said, introductions, with getting to know Peg and Guillermo and talking about belonging and how central it is to feelings of connection, are you ready to talk about Bruno, Encanto, and belonging? Me too. Let's go. Guillermo Serrano, Peg Fong, welcome so much to the Humans Connecting podcast.
Happy to be here.
Hola.
Hola, and Guillermo, I must apologize straight up that you're going to be likely subjected to my Spanish, which I've been told has a bit of a Venezuelan bend to it, but that I've not really spoken in close to 20 years. So, please just be patient with me if that happens. But Guillermo and Peg, I'm just so thrilled to have you on for this episode. And while the cover of this episode is all about the movie Encanto and what it can tell us about belonging, as I said before we started recording, the concept itself of belonging is central to feeling connected. And when we feel connected, we don't feel lonely. And in the intro, I said that both of you work on the podcast Alone Together and the Spanish version, Juntos en Soledad. So I'm really just so thrilled to have this conversation because I have a feeling that we're going to nerd out. So, Peg, I'm going to start with you. How did you get to be the host in English of Alone Together?
Well, I think one of the ways that I have been talking about loneliness and writing about it as a journalist is that I know that there was a lot of science behind it, and the science was something that was out there, but it didn't really allow people to say, "Oh, science is going to cure our loneliness." And then during the pandemic, as with so many people, it became okay. It became easier to say, "Hey, I'm lonely." And I knew that for me, that this was really the opportunity that I had been waiting for a long, long time to be able to say, let's start talking about it. Let's start communicating. Let's start connecting with each other and be able to talk about loneliness in a way that it has removed all of the stigma, that we can all understand that loneliness is universal. It's also very personal and very private, but it doesn't only need to be kept inside. It should also be allowed that we can express it. And so, the pandemic did allow that way for us to be able to say, let's talk about loneliness. And I so appreciate what you are doing, Phil, out there about talking about the need for belonging and the need for connection. And for me, when I was thinking about how can I talk about loneliness, it was asking people, let's be curious about it. Let's learn from each other, and let's learn that, we may be alone as we were during the pandemic, as we are always in different ways, but we can learn from each other and we can be alone together.
Thank you. That's there is such power in following that curiosity. Because it can be so easy when it comes to loneliness, it can be so easy to judge it and get to the inevitability, at least within myself, that I am broken, that I am unworthy of love and belonging as a human because I'm experiencing loneliness, rather than and judgment rarely helps. But curiosity kills judgment. And what we're finding here at the Humans Connecting podcast with our guests is that curiosity is the way that they've moved forward and out. So I just wanted to flag that word, and listeners and viewers of the podcast who have heard a few of the episodes. I just wanted to say that you've probably clocked already that there's a theme there of curiosity, and I just want to come back to that perhaps in the wrap up of the episode after our chat with Guillermo and Peg. Guillermo, how about you? How did you get to be the host of Juntos and Soledad?
It's like discovering an amazing service, an amazing amount of knowledge that was in English. And at some point in the way that I saw it, the material was waiting for someone to recycle. And I decided, like, what if we take that amazing concept and we just bring it to Spanish speakers, Portuguese speakers, because it's a universal problem, and Latinos particularly with this macho culture. And when you are so macho, you don't show weaknesses. You don't show that you are a fragile human being. So I think it's very important to bring that notion of vulnerability. And I think that stigma, you are lonely, you are such a loser. And I think it's important to have that conversation down there in South America, in Latin America, in Spain, pretty much the Latin part of Europe, Portugal, España, and so on. So for me was an opportunity, and I think there's a lot of research, and we heard over and over Harvard, Princeton, all these big universities telling us, hey, we discovered that this freaking thing is super bad. We know that. And as you mentioned earlier, it kills. So what? But what we can do, we know that it's freaking bad. What are we going to do? So what I love about Peg's approach is that you mentioned the key word, curiosity. When she brings, hey, you know something? There was one guy a century years ago, and he was a painter, and he got a panic attack because he felt freaking bad because he got Spanish fever, and he thought he was going to die, and he made this amazing painting, and she talks to the director of the museum, the person who curated that, and this person is telling us, hey, guess what? He got a panic attack. He felt horrible. He felt lonely. And then for me, a person who lived a century ago, he's feeling the same vulnerability. He is afraid. He thinks that COVID is going to kill him and it's freaking bad. Man, that was an amazing discovery, how I was connected to a person from another century based on curiosity, on an artistic perspective on loneliness. So I'm talking about the painting, The Scream of Robert Monk. No, I don't know if it's Edward Monk.
That's right.
And that's it. So for me, Peg's legacy is a gift. And yeah, I think it's great that she gave me the opportunity to make it translated to different languages.
Yeah. Yeah.
In that episode, that was about walking in nature, because written during the height of the pandemic, many of us, and this is how you and I first met, Phil, because you were out for a walk and you reached out to me, right?
That's
And I was
right.
like, number coming in from Australia, but you were out for a walk, and I don't know if it was that episode, but one of the episodes that I wrote was about, if you're walking out in nature and you're lonely, how can you understand this? How can you put this into context? And with that painting, the Scream, he was walking out in nature and he just felt this huge existential crisis about who are we? Why are we out here? And here I am alone in nature. But as we learned from others in that episode, is that even if you're walking by yourself, you can be part of something. You can be part of, nature around you. You can be, if you're around living things, that's enough. That's
Yeah.
enough. And that is enough to kind of move on. And I love the fact that you were walking and you heard the podcast Alone Together, A Curious Exploration of Loneliness, and you were curious enough to reach out. And I was like, who is this man? Who is this who's contacting me? And it was such a gift. And it is what you say. It's this we all have this ability to reach out, and that is what connecting is all about, right? Is
Yeah.
that you may feel alone, but there's probably someone out there who needs you. If you can recognize it, maybe if you can reach out to someone, this is the beginning of connecting. And
Yeah.
if we can connect, we can belong, right? And it's such a simple concept. It has the complexities of the universe there, Phil, and we need to tackle it. I'm with you, my friend.
Yeah.
What to do to get there, right?
Yeah.
But
Right.
Peg, I want to bring something else. If let's say I'm going to make a hypothetical scenario, I feel like a weirdo. I'm feeling that I'm having panic attacks because this pandemia was horrible and makes me feel so vulnerable, how insignificant I am in regards to my relation with nature. So I feel like, oh, I'm an outcast. But then you make me see that an amazing human being, someone who transcends his death, which is Monk, he creates something that connects to me. This is so powerful. And yes, I do not overcome my feeling, but that gives me some elements of connection with something bigger that in some way is pretty much the name of your project, Alone Together. So you feel that you're not that alone, and that itself gives you some kind of relief.
Yeah. Yeah. I so love the idea of the words alone together, because it speaks to a truth that is often so uncomfortable. And I say this in my work in supporting humans, supporting individual humans, and now, to all listening and viewing for all times. We are our own common denominator. We are, as humans, as individual humans, the only common denominator that runs all the way through our life. All the numerators, come and go, and like through life. Some stay for a long time, some are fleeting. But we're all doing this together. We are all these, amazing, beautiful, weird, slightly odd, but amazing humans, together, kind of doing the best we can with what we've got wherever we are in the world, and trying to be good people about it. What I really loved, and viewer and listener, I just wanted to share this with you. I was listening to Alone Together, was listening to Peg's voice through my headphones. And I still see it. It was a very cold morning in winter in 2021 here in Canberra, and I was out I was out walking. Peg, you got fantastic memory. And I was out walking, and there was something about it that listening to Peg kind of piece together the story through the episode, and there's going to be links in the episode description so you can listen to Alone Together in English, or Juntos en Soledad in Spanish, and the way that it was kind of pieced together was sort of at once. And winter of 2021 here in Canberra, at least, we were under lockdown. And it was just this kind of balm that, yep, like, yep, we're literally alone together. But this was just this at once. I used to really look forward to hearing the episodes and Peg joining me for a walk. And so I used technology for good. And each of us has a phone that's probably within arm's distance of us right now. And we can use that as a way of consuming information, or we can use that as a tool of communication and a tool of connection. And so I decided that I would use this as a tool of connection. And Peg didn't really know me from a bar of soap. And I'm like, kind of felt like, a teenager. I'm like, hi, I'm Phil. Long-time listener, first-time caller. But I simply said, like, the way that you are doing things, it's amazing. I'm kind of sort of doing something similar in my work. And then, we started chatting and exchanging numbers. So we moved from Instagram to WhatsApp and stuff. And here we are today. But that comes when we choose to do connection, not choose to think about connection, not choose to kind of sort of maybe perhaps do something about that one point at some point in time. No, getting out the phone, tapping the record button, and saying something even though you don't really know what to say and you hate the sound of your own voice. And choosing to let someone know that what they're doing and how they're doing it is appreciated from someone on a walk in suburban Canberra on a very cold morning, crisp, clear morning in Canberra. And they're, in a studio, or I think you said at one point it was even in your closet in your house. That in Vancouver, on the other side of the Pacific. And it's that helps us, how we choose to bridge that distance to connect with someone. And if you're a listener, you have that right now.
And I have to say, Phil, I recorded that. You sent me a message, and I was so panicked. I put it on my phone and the voice memos because I didn't want to lose it. I still have it. Sometimes when I'm feeling like we all have these moments where we feel like, okay, am I getting through? Is anyone listening? Is anything? And I have it, and it's on my phone, and I carry it with me, and I've listened to it, and I know it was cold because you were saying it's pretty cold out here, right? I remember you saying that it was cold, and Guillermo mentioned this, that when Juntos en Soledad first launched, we weren't sure how it would play in South America. We weren't sure how it would play in many of these countries where, there are certain places in the world where people feel more open about talking about loneliness. We weren't sure. We weren't sure about South America. And I would say that, for our listeners, or for your listeners, on Spotify, people started writing in and saying thank you. And we heard so many thank yous for doing this. I appreciate it. And just that word, that I appreciate it, it enabled other people to reach out. And I think for me, we've gotten more comments on Juntos on Soledad than we did with Alone Together. And I think it just took people to say, hey, I want to say, I want to say I listened to this and thank you for this episode. And it's not about being appreciated. It's about the fact that one person did this and it enabled other people to reach out and say, okay, I can also talk about this. I did this on my own. I listened to this on my own and I'm getting out there. And I think that's the power of being able to hear and to listen to each other. And
Yeah.
to me, your message about humans connecting, we talked about your favorite character, right? In
Yeah.
Encanto, and yours is the strong character, and my character is Dolores, because all she can do is hear. All she can do is listen to, and she can hear everything and no one listens to her,
Yeah.
but she hears everything that everyone else is talking about. And there is that loneliness as well. And if you just listen and you're not able to speak up and to communicate if you're dismissed, and as we all know that we are afraid to speak up because we think, as if we speak up, then people are going to know how weird I am. People are going to know how alone I am. People are going to recognize that that I do not belong, right?
Mm.
And that has such an extreme loneliness if we're taking in everything but we're not able to express it.
Yeah. Yeah. If we're on receive rather than transmit sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what we've kind of I'm loving this conversation. I'm so here for it. And I wanted to say that one of the episodes and one of the final episodes, and I could still see my mind's eye where I was listening to it, and my partner Jeff and I were driving in our car. And we were listening to the episode about Encanto and not talking about Bruno. And as I said in the intro, I can't sing. We haven't paid Disney any of the rights. So, if you know like the song, feel free to sing along in my head with for you to sing along to it in my head. But I still remember we were driving through this small country town off the highway, and listening to it, and it was so profoundly great. And I'm gonna link profoundly great. Like I'm speaking English. Like my ability to speak English is leaving me. But I'm gonna link to that episode because it was such a powerful way of linking this movie, which in early 2022, 2022, yes, was incredibly popular. I want to ask both of you, like, how did what does Encanto speak to you about belonging, connection, and loneliness, and like the human condition? What was the reason for the episode of Alone Together and Juntos and Soledad?
uh Good, I start because I'll leave this mostly for Guillermo. Guillermo was the one who suggested that episode. He's from, well, he'll tell you he's from Bogota, Colombia, but there was so many aspects of it that me as an outsider couldn't see, right? But part of the loneliness of the trauma of war, of losing people, but also that understanding of being alone among family members
Yeah,
was so powerful. And you were the one who brought that to me as one of the producers of Alone Together. And I have to say it was one of those episodes where the reaction afterwards was beyond, it was one of our top performing episodes in terms of people responding to it, because the understanding that even in your own family you can feel alone, and that is all part of this understanding of, you know can we be who we are and be able to tell people who biologically we may be closest to, but sometimes we can't. And
yeah,
there's such profound loneliness among that even though they live in this house with many doors, this magical house, that people couldn't speak to each other. And,
yeah,
and people were keeping things inside because they couldn't talk about it, right? This is why Bruno left, right? This
Yeah.
is why he went into hiding, was because he had a truth that he wanted to share. No one wanted to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Guillermo?
yeah, so it was Guillermo was the one who came up with it. Yeah.
So I want to say that certainly there's so many elements from El Encanto and 100 Years of Solitude, sorry. So many elements. And I just want to mention one character, that one of my favorite characters in 100 Years of Solitude is Remedios la Bella, Remedios the Beauty. And she was so beautiful that she ended up going up to the sky like an angel, because she was like not from this world. She was made out of sugar from angel stuff. And that craziness is amazing, because that woman was the freaking lonely woman. She was so beautiful that she don't belong to this world. She has to go somewhere else, because and you can see. So let's go back to El Encanto. And my favorite character is Bruno. And Bruno has so many dark elements. In many towns in Colombia, where I was born and raised, people who were considered stupid because they were not smart enough, because they were neurodivergent, they were autistics. I don't know exactly what Bruno was, but certainly he has a different way of understanding the world. Cognitive, he has some issues. We don't know, because we don't have elements, all what we can capture. But certainly in Colombia, when you have these individuals, they hidden, literally, they lock them, because it was not good that people realized that, oh, you have one stupid in your family. So probably Bruno is someone who has this kind of, I'm going to use the word neurodiversity. Yeah. And in real life, I am doing my PhD, and my PhD is about autism and neurodiversity, how people who see the world different, they struggle a lot in many, many ways. This is science. This is not a movie. So what I love the most about the movie is how Disney, this corporation, they were able to reflect the culture from the country where I was born in many ways that we don't fully understand the way that we behave. And they were able to grasp that. And again, I just want to say that the embody of loneliness is Bruno. He ended up living between the walls of the house. For your audience that didn't watch the movie, this individual, he was rejected by the family for the reason that I believe is not official, because nobody is telling us this is the condition of that man. So he was rejected. He, on his own, he decided to live something in between the big walls of the house. So that was the maximum expression for me of loneliness. And ironically talking, this individual is the one who resolved the problem of the family, ignoring loneliness, and then a series of events happen, and they need to confront that individual, that loneliness, and something happens out of that. That's the way that I see the movie. And yes, it's a clear reflection of the country. And it sounds very dramatic, what I'm going to say. My grandfather was killed you know what is the name where he was born? My grandfather the name of the town is called Socorro, that you can translate something like help. Okay, we need to slow down. Think for a second how you could end up born in the whole beautiful places in the universe. You born in Socorro. How you don't born in, I don't know, Hope or Encanto. No. He was born in Socorro, and he was killed. Why? Because he speaks too much. And for whatever, and my family, literally, like the family from the movie, they move from Socorro to Bogota. And I can understand this dynamic. I fully understand. I saw a lot of reflections of that reality. And yeah, very, very interesting movie, very interesting conversation. And again, my favorite character, Bruno.
I have to say, listener, back in 2001, back in 2001, I moved from Canberra to Caracas on our first diplomatic posting. And on the way, we stopped in Bogota. And 2001 in Bogota was not a safe place. And it was after the Russell Crowe movie Proof of Life came out. And essentially it was based on the FARC in Bogota, like kidnapping people and things. And I remember being in Bogota and staying in this hotel and being absolutely terrified to leave the hotel because I would be kidnapped. Anyway, I ventured out very gamely. And, you know, I was 24 years old at the time, and I went to McDonald's and I didn't speak Spanish much at all at this stage. Yeah, it was very, very tough, I have to say, like trying to communicate. And it was kind of like my first time in a country where I couldn't speak the language. I traveled around Europe, but I speak French and German. But this way, you know, it was kind of like the first time, but I was terrified. But what I distinctly remember back in 2001 would be walking around the streets of Bogota and seeing essentially a whole lot of domestic refugees, people like how Guillermo has said, you know, who were forced to relocate from cities and towns throughout Colombia for a variety of reasons. You know, this was the time of the narco kings and FARC. And people just sort of, you know, my kind of first experience of seeing refugees living in the streets. And I really want to go back to Colombia because when I lived in Venezuela, it was simply far too dangerous for us to spend any time in Colombia. I transferred through Bogota Airport a few times. But it was very dangerous to actually leave the airport, and I've not been able to go back, but I really want to go back. However, like this is, you know, just this country that is so rich culturally, historically, economically, and so much potential for the longest time really did not wasn't realizing it at all. And so it is really great that I have to say that you know, this movie helped portray Colombia in a different way than perhaps many of us, particularly on this side of the Pacific. And we, you know that Colombian students have been studying here in Australia, and many now call Australia home. But it paints Colombia in a different way than what we would actually see in a from the collective kind of impression that we would have of that country from this side of the world. And it really does speak to, you know, the importance of family, the importance of community, and the importance of knowing history, and, you know, playing your part in all of that, which I think is really important to highlight from this kind of perspective, you know, very far away from Colombia and perhaps, you know, a country that many here in Australia at least, you know, don't actually think too much about beyond the preconceived notions of a time in the 70s and 80s and into the 90s where Colombia was not a place that would that was held in high regard, perhaps.
May I
I think
say something that, oh, sorry, Peg, go ahead, please.
No. I was just going to say that you probably have something to add to this, Guillermo. But there's the external trauma of being in a place, and then we all carry in different ways internal trauma in our own families and in the workplace sometimes and in
Yeah.
schools, wherever it is. We have this internal trauma that is also just as powerful and can hold us back and can keep us from being who we truly are, because we can't release that. And if we had this sense of belonging, if we did have this belief that people are receptive to who we really are, it does go a long way. And I know that this is something that, Guillermo, you have talked about with your students as well in your university. I've been lucky enough to sit in a few of your classes, so I know that you have talked about this, that this need for all of us to belong is so
Mm.
powerful.
Yes, and I think when you grow up in that level of adversity, when I think about my uncles, my grandmother, single mother, 12 kids, the grandfather was killed. Get out of here. We don't want you. You have few hours to get out of this town. They rush into Bogota. All what they have was family. That's the only thing that they had. That the only asset they had in life. So I grew up with this notion that family was the most important thing. And then, same as the movie, you can see that the dynamic of the family is difficult, is complex. And sometimes you feel like, I want to go to Canada. What? Yes, I think that's the place for me. I was the first in my family to live out of the country. And there was something really wrong because I was denying the whole value, the whole perspective that they have about life. So I think in that sense, the movie reflects perfectly how you ended up believing that family is the only reason to give meaning into life. And maybe you need to reevaluate that, which is, again, what happens when this group of people ended up discussing with the weirdo that is hidden in the walls. He brings some element that let them understand that they need to rethink the notion of family. So it's a beautiful, complex, and your conversation is very philosophical, and we can spend hours here, but I think you nail it. Bringing this movie and how people like me, that I grew up believing that, and certainly I came to the conclusion that I love my family, but no, I gotta go to Canada, and I am literally single here on my own. And I have a beautiful relationship with one person that she is from Chinese background, and that's it. That's all the family that I have. But that's my decision, and it works for me.
Yep. Yep. That sounds very Canadian. But yeah, I feel when I watched, and I'm always moved by two things always happen when I watch Encanto. And we'll find out what two things happen after this quick break. We'll be right back.
Hey, kia ora. It's Mona from Humans Connecting here. We're really glad that you're here. I hope that you're getting something out of this and vibing with us. If you're curious about what else we do, come check out our website, humansconnecting.org. We've got some products and services, including inclusion prompts to help you put your connection goals into action. Now back to the show. Thanks.
Welcome back. Are you ready to find out what two things always happen when I watch the movie Encanto? Let's jump back in. Firstly, I start speaking more Spanish. And as the only Spanish speaker in the house, that's tolerated for a few sentences, and then it's like, yeah, really? No. But then the other thing that happens is I'm profoundly moved, and it speaks to kind of my loneliness experience. And I'm moved in the way that towards the end of the movie, after they've had the reckoning, And things get to a head. I'm trying to not say things, so if you haven't watched it yet, viewer, and listener, that not spoiling it too much, just enough. But what the redemption, the path back, is essentially dropping the bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of ways that I could have said that, but essentially, like every single character in that was playing the positive role, was showing up only positively in the movie, but each and every one of them quietly was falling apart, was becoming more and more unhappy. And it took someone brave and courageous who was trying to find her place. This is Mirabelle, trying to find her place in the family because she didn't fit in, and she was desperately hustling to fit in. It's like, I, desperate hustler of fitting in, like here, throughout much of my life. And it wasn't until things got so bad that the only way to the other side was through, not avoiding, not denying, not hiding, not pretending it wasn't there. And it speaks to so much of my loneliness experience. And I know that my loneliness experience is not unique. It's unique to me, but each of us have many similarities when we do feel loneliness and we do need connection. And to me, it was the dropping of all the bullshit. And Mirabelle, her gift was actually seeing things as they are and accepting them. And when she began to see things as they are and accept them, she created the environment for the people that she loved, the community that she loved. So everyone around her to step in and be themselves, just as they are in that moment. Now, if that's not a connection, if that's not belonging, that's the end of the movie. Kind of always, someone's chopping onions at that point of the movie. And I get a little teared up because it's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's coming up for you there, Peg?
Well, when you talk about that, I mean, how many times do we as individuals we gloss over things, we praise other people's gifts. We talk about, all the people in my family are so wonderful, they're so magical. They do so many amazing things. And this is our way of saying, look at them, don't look at me.
Mm.
Right. And I think that is such Maribel, the fact that she doesn't have a gift and she goes around telling everyone else how wonderful they are and praising her family is her way of being able to say that if I don't have a gift, my gift is to, make other people feel good, right? And make other people be praised and do that instead of saying that the message is we all have our own gifts. We all have this ability to be able to be there for someone else without diminishing who we are. Like we don't need to make people feel better by diminishing who we are. And I think that that
Mm.
is truest gift that Mirabelle comes with because she spends like so much of that movie saying, my sister is beautiful, my sister has flowers wherever she goes, and my other sister, and everyone has a gift in my family. And then when someone say, well, what's your gift? And it's like this, la 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 la, right? Don't let's not talk about me, but it's that recognition, right? That it may not be the gift that your sister had or someone else has, but it is your gift and it's so powerful if you can recognize that. You don't even need other people to recognize it.
Yeah. 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 How common is that? Just by the side, like, Guillermo, I want to throw to you just shortly, but how common is that? That when, and this is actually one of the signs of loneliness that I encourage us all to um, to pay attention to is when someone's showing up for someone else all the time. The first person to offer, to volunteer, to do this, to do that. The helper, how often do they allow themselves to be helped? You know, there's the you know, the person who you know, does all the hosting, does all the organizing, the community events, all that kind of stuff. Quite often, there's a need there for others to recognize and go, "Hi, how are you? Like, what's going on? Are you, like, you know, checking, like, connect with you?" But then the helper doesn't allow anyone to help them. Yeah, in that sense, and I'm thinking of the opening scenes there where Mirabelle is walking through the town, and there's that awesome line of like, and that's why coffee's for grown-ups. But yeah, like she's, as you said there, Pete, like she really is just like focused on everybody else. But when like not even the spotlight, but when the merest hint of a question about her, like it's deflected. And I just, yeah, that's so common. The helper, the booster feels very uncomfortable being helped or boosted or like in any way kind of recognized. Yeah, I think we do get to explore why, but yeah, I just think that's an important sign to pay attention to in other people around you, viewer and listener as well. But Guillermo, what's coming up for you there?
I don't know if I'm following you, but I'm gonna bring an idea. I think this notion of family is a microcosmos. And I think it's important to have this conversation out of Colombia. Yes, it's a beautiful way of giving us an introduction because we have the flowers, the nature, which is true. Colombia is freaking amazing in terms of nature. True, 100%. But I think what is important, why we don't take that microcosmos called the family. The family could be a small organization, you're a small business, you're a small something that you interact. And you need to find your own place in that microcosmos. As a talent management professor, that's what I do. I get paid for sharing my experience. And you know what is my experience? I've been doing more mistakes than my students, and I get paid for that. And that's my responsibility, because if it took for me 20 years to find something, I wish, and I'm crossing my fingers, that maybe my students only takes 5 years, 1 year, hopefully months. Of course, that is not true. But that's the point. How in that microcosmos you find your place, you find what is your value. So I don't know if this makes sense, but I think, yes, beautiful movie. We need to move forward from Colombia. Why? Because for many people around the world, Colombia, nice place, but doesn't speak to me. My father wasn't killed. I didn't have to get running into another city. So it's kind of the Hollywood. But yes, don't get me wrong, listeners. That's true. That's a reflection of my own family. It's not a joke. Hollywood is doing an amazing job. But get out of that, move on, take that context and how that reflects in someone in Canberra, sorry for the pronunciation, or in Delhi or in Vancouver, how we're going to take that microcosmos, how I'm going to find my own purpose, my own freaking contribution to make me feel that I get it. I find something that I'm so good doing this. And at that moment, maybe is what the purpose of the whole this conversation. When we find that, maybe we feel like, wow, finally I'm doing something that makes sense, and that gives a lot of joy here inside, and that gives balance. I don't know if what I said makes sense, or if I am shifting too much out of the context of the conversation.
No, absolutely, absolutely not for me. Peg, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, we talked about our favorite characters, but we haven't talked about our favorite songs from the movie. And for me, and I'm not going to attempt any Spanish speaking. thank to your listeners as a gift to your listeners. But my favorite song in there is about the two butterflies, dos oruguitas, and they have this beautiful moment. And I know it's about talking about two butterflies, but I always internalize that, right? And maybe it's just me and the way that I internalize it, but I always thought that the two butterflies are us, us as individuals, where they say, you have to fly apart in order to be able to reunite. Was that the line? Does anyone remember? Like, and I remember that because while they are talking about two butterflies, I always think about those two butterflies as the way that we are who we are truly, and the way that maybe other people see us, or the way that we want other people to see us. And we have to reconcile that. We have to be able to connect that within ourselves, that we are who we are, and we are good enough. We're great, right?
Yeah.
And that we can reach out to people and help others. That's even better. But we are who we are, and that is enough. And those are the two butterflies that for me was what I took away from that song, and why I love that song so much is that, I think there's a line that says, "Don't hold on too tight." Right? And I think we all have that within us, that we
Mhm.
we have this idea of who we are. We have this idea of who we want people to see us as, but we can't hold on to it too tight, because we have to let it fly. And it's only
Yeah.
by letting it go out that we can be truly who we are. Right? And this whole idea of belonging and connection is that, for me, is that ability to say we are multitudes within ourselves, and we have to recognize that, and we have to feel comfortable with that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And I think it goes, pardon me, it goes there, Peg, to what Guillermo was saying in terms of like how belonging, it's kind of like this paradox, and we're always searching to belong, and we need to know it, we need to hold it, but we also need to let it go. So we belong everywhere and this is paraphrasing the late Dr. Maya Angelou, but paraphrasing her by saying, we belong everywhere when we belong nowhere. But when we belong to ourselves, we belong everywhere. And
Mhm.
so that to me and viewer, listener, and Peg and Guillermo, that's like, the reason for my first tattoo here. Um, and that actually is a tree. And a tree simply grows where it is. And, it's a reminder for me that I belong everywhere, wherever I am, if I am me. Um, and I think with that scene there, Peg, and this is down by the river, this is the start of the reckoning. It's the start of it's the dropping of all the bullshit
Yeah.
and the letting go, which is so very powerful. And Guillermo, to your point about not just belonging in the family, but belonging in community. Here at Humans Connecting, we talk about the three pillars of connection. And listener, if you're listening on the podcast, I am pointing to our logo. And our logo talks about connection to ourselves, connection to those most important to us, and connection to community. That's the three pillars of connection. And when we are ourselves, the connection that we then get from the other two pillars, which are external to ourselves, is the connection that we need because we're being us. And the end of Encanto, they're talking about, essentially like it is the stripping away of all the things that all the stories and narratives that they've built around the community, the family, La Casita, the house. And in one way, like the only holder of the truth in all of that is the house. The house sees it all. And slowly but surely, it takes the destruction of the house for everyone else to see what is actually there. And so I think what I want to ask in this instant, there's two more questions that I've got. And the first is, how has Encanto and not just Encanto, but Guillermo, to your point, how has belonging, how has connection and understanding loneliness helped you in your work in helping and supporting other humans sort of sit with their loneliness as well? So, Peg, I want to throw to you
Wow,
if that question makes sense.
that's the $1,000,000 question. Ouch.
So I'm going to tell you a great Australian expression here, Guillermo, and I love this one. There is a very blunt way of putting this, a bit of a rude way of putting this, but we're not here to mess around with spiders. So yeah, just a swear word that rhymes with truck. We're not here to truck spiders. So let's just get right to it.
So is your question how I address loneliness through connection? I'm missing a little bit.
Yeah, so how have the concepts of belonging and connection helped you understand loneliness in how you talk about loneliness to your audiences? That's a better question. Thank you for the second go at that. That's a much better way of phrasing that question.
I think this journey with the help of Peg give me explore this in deeper ways. And I don't, it's a pretty, again, philosophical idea that I don't have the answer, but certainly you have some situations that allows you to have deeper connection with humans. But you mentioned 3 pillars. I think I tried to make some notes about your logo. And you said the first is connecting to yourself. It sounds very catchy, but if that doesn't happen, nothing is going to happen. And I'm going to tell you as a grown-up man, I think never, ever in my whole life, I felt more balanced emotionally, psychologically, and economically, despite that when I see myself at the mirror and you are like, at what moment this happens? Like, you know what is the biggest fear? Wrinkles in my neck. When I noticed wrinkles in my neck, that was the end of the world. But then I realized, okay, that is happening. But at the same time, this is the first time that I have if I can measure wisdom, I never felt more how do you say?
Wise.
Wise, thank you.
Yep.
Ever, if I compare in my 20s, in my 30s, in my 40s, never, ever. So I don't know if I'm going to answer your question. I think this feeling of plenitude, of fulfillment is happening because something inside makes me feel better with myself. So I think, as you mentioned before, if that doesn't happen, there's no way that I can connect and I can understand other people. So probably if I try to answer your question, there's a personal work that I've been and I can feel it that it has its own dividends. And by default, when you are feeling so good with yourself, you start feeling more connection naturally with other people. You ended up doing this amazing podcast and you put your soul there. And we have people from Ukraine, from New Zealand, from all over the world saying, hey, you're amazing. And you are like, that feels good. But again, that I think is byproduct for something that happens inside me.
Yeah. I'm glad that was a tough question, that you found that a tough question, because it is a tough question. It's the thing of life. So I'm not apologizing for it to be a tough question, but I've taken notes and I'm taking your answer. Peg, Peg, how about you? Blah, blah, how have the concepts of belonging and connection and loneliness helped you with the work that you're doing on supporting others through that podcast Alone Together?
I think yeah, Guillermo had a really good answer. I don't know if I
I
could
know you
follow.
did.
He had a really good answer, but I think the fact that it doesn't end. You are where you are, Phil. I am here in Vancouver. You and I know people all around the world who are doing research, who are friends and colleagues who are doing research into this, um, who are coming up with amazing answers to some questions that we haven't thought about and some more questions. And I think maybe that's, for me, has been the most powerful, is that there will always be questions. Will we ever solve loneliness? I don't think so.
No.
I think that I don't think you and I are doing what we do because we think that we're going to come up with the one perfect solution. Or, when I started this, oh, a pill is going to end our loneliness. But it's the fact that we are searching and doing this together is human connection, right? That we are able to connect to each other by saying, let us look into this. Let us be curious about this. Let us connect to others who are also thinking about loneliness and wondering about loneliness and saddened by it and bewildered by it and hurt by it and damaged by it. All of these ways that loneliness has seeped into our pores. And if we can say, you know what, I'm not the only one that
Mm,
it's come into. Um, and if it can't be solved, at least I know that there are other people out there who are on this with me. And what and I say this, every day I meet more people saying, I'm glad we're talking about this. What's your answer? There is no answer, but we're doing this together. We're finding more questions together. And
mm,
by doing this, maybe we can help someone someone who hasn't been able to say, yeah, loneliness, I feel lonely. They might have been able to hold it inside, but they haven't released it as the butterfly that it is yet. But maybe together
Mm.
we can have more butterflies, right? And
yeah.
and less work.
I would
Yeah.
like to add something else, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, please, please.
Something that I notice is that our society is putting so much emphasis in cognitive solutions. And my understanding is that the world has so many smart people. We are surrounded by extremely successful people. Oh, making so much trouble, making so much hurting everyone else. So I believe that we need to look more about on the topic of emotional intelligence, asking questions that cognitively probably doesn't make too much sense, but certainly give more solid answers. And that's probably my own personal journey. I try to pursue answers based on brain, which is great. But sometimes the brain goes all over the place and not a good output. So in this personal journey, and this is something that I'm glad that science in businesses today, we put more, or I can see a shift looking for more emotional intelligence rather than, yes, programming, great. You know about coding, about great, we love that. But if you don't understand how this connects with this, we're missing something. So I think we need to look for more for those kind of not answering coming from cognitive knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah. I think listener on the podcast, you didn't see when Guillermo said, from this to this, it was pointing to his head and then to his heart. But for me, I cannot agree with either of you more. I think for me, there's something there that you said there, Peg, which we can't cure loneliness. But gee, it's nice to know that, there's people doing it together. And from their perspective. And then Guillermo, picking up on what you said there, in terms of like the understanding. We can know things, but sometimes we need to feel things. And I think that for me, we come unstuck. We come unstuck in anything really, but specifically talking about loneliness, connection, belonging. We come unstuck when we keep it in our head, when we think about it, when we rationalize it. Loneliness isn't an experience only in the head. It's experienced in the mind, heart, and soul. And when we talk about loneliness in the third person as a concept, it is this. It keeps it outside of us. It keeps it outside of us, but we connect where loneliness is. And loneliness is in the first person. And so when we start talking about loneliness, not just as a concept in the third person, we don't talk about your loneliness or loneliness in the second person. We start talking about my loneliness and when I experience loneliness. That then gives permission. That's the destruction of la casita. That then gives permission to everyone to go, oh yeah, I've actually not been feeling all that great within myself for a while too. And so picking up on something that you said there, Peg, like, we can't cure loneliness, but we can understand it more. We can feel it more. We can allow it to be. Then we can do great things.
And if we let the community help us rebuild, right? Is what
Yes.
is broken, right? Because they couldn't rebuild it on their own, right?
No.
They couldn't have rebuilt something that is destroyed. You do have to reach out. And I would say that, do people say, what can we do about loneliness? And I said, we can reach out, we can connect, right?
Yeah.
We can learn again. If we feel shy, if we feel overwhelmed, we can learn that connections are built person to person, human to human, right? It has to be that way. And it is the most powerful thing that we can do for ourselves and for others is to reach out and to connect.
Yep. Yep. Peg, I want to sort of take what you've just said there, and I want to sort of put it into another kind of context. And Guillermo, it goes to something that you said about the machismo culture in Latin America. Here in Australia, the definition, particularly for a man, the definition of friendship, of mateship, is being the first to offer help. Being the first to offer help. And, we have been, I'm sure collectively, like death by suicide is the leading rate of death for men here in Australia between 18 and I think 18 and 30. I could be wrong. And I've been to funerals where everybody says, oh, if only he'd reached out. I didn't know. I didn't know. And so not only do we need to reach out for help, we actually need to accept the help that is given to us. So not only, in offering help, we need to ask for it and we need to receive it. And the asking for help and the receiving of what's given takes so much courage that I never want that to be to go unnoticed. We're decent human beings, no matter who we are and where we are in the world. We will show up for other people in need. But if we're quietly disintegrating in whatever capacity within ourselves, and we're not asking for support, and then we're not receiving the support that's offered, like that's only kind of doing half the equation that's necessary to close that connection loop.
I
Yeah.
think you and I both talked about this, Phil, that there's hope, right? And
Mm.
it's that lack of hope that you're never going to stop feeling a certain way, that you're never, there's no way out. That is what leads to, for many people, to say that there is only one solution, but there isn't. And there is always people out there, and there is always hope. And I don't say this
Always hope.
lightly. You and I have said this, you and I've had this conversation before that, once things are over, it's over. But, humans will surprise you, even if you think that there is no one out there who is out there to listen. And podcasting can be a really
Yes.
lonely and isn't it,
Yes.
right? I mean, you
Yeah.
don't know. You don't know if people are listening to you unless people reach back and let you know. And then you're like, they listened, right? But we don't know. We see numbers. We know that Alone Together has been heard in over 30 countries. We know there's been hundreds and thousands of downloads, but it is a human on that other end who heard it. And I know that there are humans out there who wanted to reach out. You did, and other people have, and there is always there is always someone there who wants to listen, right?
Yeah.
Who wants to hear what it is that you want to share. And it is, for any of your listeners out there, there's people out there, and we can all listen better, and we all want to listen, right? We
Yeah.
all want to hear each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliantly said there, Peg. Final question. I think we've kind of answered it. So the challenge is in like 2 sentences, maybe 3. All right. If we're up for the challenge. But the final question is, and I purposefully didn't ask you this in the emails over the last week setting this up. But it's become tradition. This is now the 8th episode of the Humans Connecting podcast. But it's become tradition whenever there's guests or a guest that I ask final question, which is for somebody who is in the middle of a loneliness experience now, what advice, what's a tip that you would give them, not would give them, that you give them right now for someone who's in the midst of a loneliness experience?
Okay, me first. Okay, I think the key word, curiosity, we heard that from the beginning on today's episode. And I think for me, art, there's a lot of artists that I'm gonna emphasize more on paintings. Many individuals through history, we are not the only ones dealing with this. And the fact that you find people that beautifully reflect that. When we see Guernica, when the Germans invade that town in Spain, and because they were kind of freedom attitude, we don't believe in this Franco, okay, you should be gone, we're gonna kill you, suckers, losers, and they did it. And someone out of this horrible situation, and it's very sad. I'm not expecting, if you are feeling alone, you're gonna be full of joy after that. No, it's gonna be shocking, because it's one of the most sad reflections of a dead little. There's one particular, there's a little boy or a girl, it's an infant, and it's dead. But the key point in here is how we are not, when we feel so sorry about ourselves, because we have to be a little bit critical about our loneliness. Yes, it's a real feeling. Agree, check. I'm with myself. But we have the tendency to feel so sorry, and this retrofit on its own. Guess what? Get out of the world and see that, yes, Picasso, he experienced that, he reflected that, and he has a message for you and for me. Let's go and see Edvard Munch. Let's go and see all these amazing painters, Edward Hopper. Oh, if you didn't see those paintings, listeners, check that guy, Edward Hopper. I apologize my pronunciation, an American painter, the most lonely people, and guess what? They are beautiful, good looking, wealthy, horrible, lonely. When you see that, you are like, oh, wow. Maybe that gives us a reflection that, yes, it's not nice what I'm feeling, but guess what? It's a universal feeling. Many people experience that. And maybe that help us, that engagement with art, that works for me. And some of this artwork, no, it's not like only Guernica that has a very, I don't want to say the word negative, but it's shocking. But some of these pieces of artwork, you can see loneliness and you can experience some kind of poetry, beauty. I don't know what it is. Again, don't pretend to understand this with your brain, because based on my limited experience, sometimes your heart understands things that doesn't make sense here. But if we only try to understand the world with our brain, that's part of the problem on my limited experience. Try to trust your heart, and maybe your heart is telling you, hey, wait a minute, there's something in that painting, in that piece of art that help you coping with that level of loneliness.
I love that. That was a few more than 3 sentences, but I'll allow it because it's a really good point. And yeah, so just for reference, the Edward Hopper, is that the one, the piece of art where there's people sitting around a diner? And they look like they're all together, but they're all okay. Yeah. Viewer, listener, it is quite a well-known piece of American art. But if you are like madly, like if you're listening or watching this, but then on another screen or on your phone, you're like Edward Hopper art, look up Edward Hopper and the Diner at 3 a.m., I think it's called. Is that right?
And
Peg,
that
can
was
you
our
help?
first episode. Yeah, that was our first
Yes.
ever episode from Alone Together, a curious exploration about why diners are such lonely places for people, and the symbolism behind it. And also we talked about the civil rights movement and how, you can sit down and be alone, or you can take a stand, as they did in the civil rights movement
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
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 And going back to your
Brilliant.
previous point, the name of the painting is, I think, is called the Night Hawks.
Nighthawk.
Right. Okay. So if you are a listener, Edward Hopper, Nighthawk, or I was going to say it in an American accent, but that would just be disrespecting everybody. So Nighthawk is how I say it on this side of the Pacific. Peg, how about you? Thank you, Guillermo. That was awesome. Art. Look at art. So your heart knows it's not alone. What about you, Peg?
Guillermo was quite philosophical, and I'll be much more tactile. Phil's listeners, if you're out there right now and you're feeling lonely, I have two pieces of advice for you. Take off your shoes or your slippers and your socks, and I want you to walk around in your bare feet, touching the ground. You're going to feel that your nerves are in your feet are touching something, and that is a start. And know that you are touching the ground, right? And I think there's something we forget about that. We kind of cover ourselves up. We walk in our shoes and we don't take the time to kind of connect physically around us. And then the second thing I would say, Phil's listeners out there, take your arm, your right arm, and put it on your left shoulder, and take your left arm and put it on your right shoulder, and give yourself a hug, right? You aren't alone, you know, and you may be alone physically right now, but you have you, and you are pretty amazing. And now that you have hugged yourself, go out and talk to someone, say hello, and be the person who can reach out to someone else. And this is not curing loneliness, but we can do something about it. And I'm grateful to you, Phil, for giving us this opportunity to talk to your listeners and have your listeners know that they aren't alone, right? And that I'm in Vancouver, we're alone together, and we value you. You are important. You are being heard and you're being listened to. And again, I'm over my 3 sentences, but you're out there and we're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. Viewer, listener, I might need you to remind me that next time I get podcasters on, like really to enforce the 3 sentence rule. Because when I'm on other people's podcasts, I cannot help myself either. But what brilliant advice. I love the different approaches there. And this this passes. This passes. And something that connects existentially is the same as something that connects physically. Like, and it reaches different parts of us and helps us be where we are and know that we're not adrift. That we're not adrift. Peg, Guillermo, this has been such a delight. It has been an absolutely, I'm recording this on a Monday morning, now Monday afternoon here in Canberra. An awesome way to start my work week. I feel incredibly fortunate and privileged and honored to have you both on the Humans Connecting podcast. But not only that, to have you in both of your ways doing what you do and how you do it. It's just fantastic to be on the team with you.
Thanks, Phil.
Oh,
I'm so happy to be here.
Wasn't that an amazing conversation that went all sorts of places about Encanto, its characters, the country of Colombia, and belonging? It's just like, oh, totally here for that episode, and I hope you enjoyed that too. Before I wrap up this episode and before you get on your way, I wanted to sit with you again and share a key highlight of mine from that chat with you. Peg mentioned the concept of gifts, and that concept of gifts is central to Mirabel's story in Encanto, and how we could want to have the most supernatural, superhuman gifts before we feel worthy of love and belonging. And until we have those kind of superhuman, supernatural gifts that makes us sort of like really special, we can want to hide ourselves and our pain and suffering that comes from not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough to be with those people around us. And so we want to show, rather than our pain and suffering, we want to only show our eternal happiness as we continue below the surface to work hard in our hustle to belong. But as Abuela says, no, she doesn't say it. Abuela sings it at the end of the movie, in the final scene of Encanto. Your gift to the world is you. And that is at both once extremely simple, but when you sit with it for a moment, just like we are now, it's extremely profound. And it's profound in its truth. So your gift is not what you do. Your gift is not in what you say or how you say it or how you're showing up for others. Your gift is you, the entirety of you. And to quote Dr. Seuss here, you're youer, like no one is more youer than you. And that is your gift. Now, all of this might be a bit tempting to dismiss as Disney drivel or Phil going on and, we should just wrap this episode up. But I suspect that if you're listening or watching me right now, that there's a spark of knowing within you. your job now, after this episode, when you get some of the songs and lyrics and all that kind of stuff of Encanto out of your head, your job is to cultivate and nurture that spark of knowing within you. And the gift of you contains the gift, right now perhaps, the gift of loneliness. And it's not a nice gift to have. Like, let's just say it's not right up there on the top of our Christmas lists. But it's the gift we have. And it's a gift that is telling you that you are missing some kind of connection that you absolutely need and you absolutely are worthy of. And that gift of connection is letting you know that you belong just as you are right now. So your job, once you've finished salsaing or merengueing around your living room or kitchen, to some of the songs and stuff of Encanto, is to pay attention to that spark of knowing within you and kindle it, like feed it. And if you do that consistently, it will soon turn into a bonfire of worthiness and belonging that rages within you, and your loneliness, by virtue of you being seen and you being heard and feeling that you belong, cannot stand a chance when you cultivate and feed that fire within you. If you don't know how to do that, if that all seems like really good, like that's inspiring stuff, but you don't know what to do next, we're right here. We're right here to serve you, support you, challenge you, and inspire you to become a connected human. Thank you so much for joining me, Peg and Guillermo, for this episode of the Humans Connecting podcast. We'd love to hear what you thought about it, so please feel free to comment on it on YouTube or through the podcast service you're listening on. And be sure to check our website, humansconnecting.org, for details about how we can support you to get the connection and sense of feeling of belonging that you need and absolutely deserve. There are also details on our website about our services for workplaces and having me as a guest on your podcast or speaking to your audience and delivering keynotes. All of the details about how you can get us in your life are there at humansconnecting.org. Finally, we're here to make a positive social impact. So if you're a business and are looking for ways to support humans to feel more connected, and you also want to have a positive impact on the world, please check the link in the episode description to partner with us. And that partnership could be through advertising on future episodes of the podcast or collaborating with us in other ways. All those details are through the website and are in the show notes, links in the show notes. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We realize that there could have been 1,000 other things that you could be doing today, but you chose to spend some time with us today. We're really grateful for it. We simply can't wait to see you in the next episode. But until then, go crank up the Encanto soundtrack. Dance like nobody's watching and dance like they are watching. Get them to dance with you too. And you'll start to become an awesomely connected human. We'll see you in the next episode.